Module 2 in this Life After Religion course is undoing religious pathology. So in this video, I would like to discuss two very common religious pathologies and how they reinforce each other. So first, question is, well, what is pathology? Some other synonyms for the word pathology would be malady, disorder, sickness, an unwholesome condition. Paired with religion, the idea of pathology is that it stems from the false beliefs, narratives, mindsets, and ideologies that we are indoctrinated with through our involvement in religion. And these are at the root, both individually and collectively, of much of the sickness and dysfunction that we experience in ourselves and in society. And I discuss at some greater length in the written content for this module exactly what some of those religious pathologies are and the mindsets that are behind them. It's a difficult thing to uproot religious pathology because these are typically embedded in who we are, and we have a tremendous amount of habit, energy, and conditioning that has reinforced and strengthened these false beliefs within us. And so the activity in this module has to do with taking very practical steps to diminish the power and ultimately uproot the religious pathology that we have within ourselves. So this is the personal work that is involved in creating a life after religion, focusing on these specific religious pathologies and uprooting them. There are two that I want to briefly discuss in this video. One of those religious pathologies is the I am bad pathology. It is the false notion that human beings are fundamentally bad. And almost all religious pathology stems from this particular falsehood. We've heard it in organized religion, this idea that we were born sinners, that we are inherently corrupt. Most people have spent many years in their lives having that fundamental falsehood reinforced, and we have strengthened it through certain thoughts, certain ways of being in the world that have all stemmed from this fundamental lie that we are fundamentally bad and corrupt. It is really the root of all the greatest inner maladies, this idea that we are fundamentally bad. If you take that premise, I am bad, then it logically follows that you can't trust yourself, which means that we are left to externalize our worth and value to something outside of ourselves. For many people, it is some sort of performance, performing our way through life, trying to achieve certain expectations or standards that are laid upon us. And this is sort of our methodology for trying to create worth and value and being good. Sometimes it involves externalizing our worth to some authority beyond ourselves, where we need somebody else to somehow proclaim or declare that we've reached some standard, that we are good, that we can be accepted based on this or that sort of belief system or philosophy. And they all stem from this idea that I am bad. So I want to dig into this particular pathology and the lie that I am bad. And for a moment, the way I want to do this is let's just remove for a moment the traditional Christian view that God created us. Let's set that aside for a few minutes and think about this first off from a little bit of a different perspective. Your fundamental human personhood involves having a mind and body. Along with that, you have 6 senses. There's sight, hearing, taste, smell, and touch. Now, those are 5, and we traditionally know about those 5 aspects of our human senses, but I mentioned that there were 6, and I say that there is 6 because I believe that cognition is the additional sense that we often don't hear about in that list. It's the functioning of the mind. They're all senses, they're just different. The first 5 senses are about data collection. We are collecting data through those 5 senses as we interact with the world. And then that 6th sense, if you will, our mind, orders that data, gives it meaning, and makes it useful for our human existence. Now, what's important to realize about all these dynamics, the idea of the human mind and body, is that they are neither good nor bad. They are non-moral. Take, for example, your computer. Now, your computer does not have the dimension of morality doesn't really relate to your computer. Your computer is a set of parts that have been put together to achieve a particular function. A computer is neither good nor bad. Now, how a person chooses to use a computer might be good or bad. You could use a computer for very noble reasons, and you could also use a computer for the purpose of inflicting harm against somebody else. But the computer itself is not moral. It's not good or bad. Same thing with the internet. The internet is non-moral. The internet is not good and it's not bad. We can use the internet for good or we can use it for bad. Now, the same is true of your human personhood. This is true of your human body. It's true of your mind. Your body and mind are neither good nor bad. They are what they are. They do what they do. And whether or not we involve ourselves in something that supports goodness or something that supports harm and destruction is about a set of choices that we make. But ultimately, the actual body, those senses, including the mind, are not moral. The idea of saying that they are either fundamentally good or fundamentally bad, this doesn't really make sense in those terms. Now, just to flesh this out a little bit further, you've probably you've heard of Charles Darwin and the theory of evolution. One of the central tenets of Darwin's evolution is this idea of the survival of the fittest, right? In order to propagate your generation, your people into the next generation, it requires the ability to survive. And Darwin said that only the fittest survive. Those who are weaker don't. Only the strong survive, Darwin said. Now, the problem with this idea is that we think of it primarily in pejorative terms. When we think of the strongest surviving, the survival of the fittest, we think of brute strength. We might think of war. We might think of whoever are the clever people who can outsmart others, deceive others, can take away from others what they don't have, that can use their physical power and strength to survive and to conquer other people that are in the way. Now, that would be a gross misunderstanding of what Darwin meant by the survival of the fittest, or the idea that only the strong survive. Because one thing that Darwin pointed out is that the number one trait for survival is cooperation. It's not brute strength, it's not war, it's not whether or not any particular individual can force their will upon somebody else and that's who survives. Darwin said that the fundamental trait, the most important characteristic or trait of the human being in order to propagate their tribe, their clan, their people into the next generation is the ability and the capacity to cooperate with others. In other words, the most significant characteristic has to do with human harmony and goodness and cooperation. Now, human beings developed language as the social technology in order to achieve human cooperation. But I'm just wanting to point out just a bit of a context here. Even with the absence of a God, even if you take away the idea of God or that God created human beings, there's a case to be made that, if anything, that human beings are fundamentally good. First off, like I said, we're fundamentally non-moral. In other words, our body and mind is neither good nor bad. It's what we choose to do with it. And Darwin pointed out that the most important thing that we do with our human body and mind in order to survive is something along the lines of goodness, cooperation, harmony. Now, psychologist Abraham Maslow developed this idea a little bit further. What Maslow said is that human beings inherently don't want to just survive. They also want to thrive. They want to thrive physically, emotionally, developmentally, socially, relationally, even spiritually. And Abraham Maslow created something called the hierarchy of needs to express this. What he said is that every human being, it doesn't matter what our differences are on the surface, fundamentally on the inside, every human being wants the same things. And he created a triangle to convey this. At the bottom of the triangle is Darwin's idea of survival, the need for water and food and air and some sort of fundamental security or safety, shelter, the fundamental aspects of survival. But then Maslow went on to say that human beings also have these emotional and relational needs. The need to be loved and to love, the need to belong, the need to have a sense of respect for oneself. And then at the top of that hierarchy of needs, Maslow talked about the need for what he called self-actualization, reaching your full potential, even transcendence, moving beyond just the common aspects of everyday life and tapping more ultimate, transcendent, or eternal realities. Maslow talked about these things, this self-actualization, this reaching one's potential, this touching of transcendence as the ultimate desire that every human being has to thrive. So I just mention all this as a way of saying that there's a case that one can make that the human being is fundamentally wired up with more positive traits and pursuits and interests than negative ones. That we fundamentally want to cooperate and experience harmony, that this is part of our very basic instinct to survival. It's not to kill off each other, it's not to war against each other, it is to cooperate. And that our greatest needs as human beings involve thriving. It involves giving and extending love. It involves belonging and offering acceptance to others. It includes wanting to realize our greatest potential and to touch transcendence. Maslow was saying that this is what it means to be human. This is the dignity and the beauty of what the human being naturally is, what the human being instinctively pursues. Okay, now let's switch gears for a moment and think about the Christian story, because most of us have heard, many people have heard through Christianity, this false belief that I am bad, I'm a sinner, I'm inherently corrupt. And I just quickly would like to point out in response to that is that the fall of humankind, where that comes up in the Bible, is in Genesis chapter 3. Now, where God creates humankind in his image and declares that human beings are good happens in Genesis chapter 1. The declaration of our goodness happens in Genesis chapter 1. So let's just do the math for a minute and think about this sequentially. 1 comes before 3. In other words, the declaration that we are good precedes this idea of the fall. And so it, even from the Christian point of view, even including biblical content from the Bible, the case can be made that fundamentally, inherently, we are good. This is the first thing that God proclaims about human beings, that we are good. And then, in fact, you can make the argument that this chapter 3, the fall in chapter 3, is our spiritual ignorance, our moving away from the truth of that fundamental goodness. And so there is an original fundamental goodness to who we are according to the Bible. And why it is that the Christian religion so often is instead declaring our original badness, it doesn't square with what the message is in the Bible, particularly at some of the most fundamental parts of the Bible that lay out the core principles and framework of the story between God and humankind, like Genesis chapter 1, when humans are declared good. Now think also about Jesus. Jesus said, I am the truth. Jesus did not say, I have the truth, I want to teach the truth. Look, here's a theology that will tell you the truth. Here are all these propositions that you can intellectualize so that you'll sort of understand the truth in your mind. No, Jesus didn't say that. He said, I am the truth. It was something Jesus was, which was the truth. What is that truth? It is the truth that there is no separation. Humanity and divinity can be paired up and entwined together without contradiction. Jesus said, that's the truth. I am divine and human. God and humankind are one. They are inseparable. That is the truth that Jesus is, the truth that he expressed and demonstrated and bore witness to. So I want to give you an alternative explanation than what we sometimes hear through the tradition of Christianity. And here it is. The fundamental nature and essence of who you are is one with God, a part of God. It is good. That divine nature and essence and spirit that we refer to when we use the word God is the fundamental and core reality of who and what you are. That essence, that nature was given a human mind and body in order to survive and thrive in a human world and reality. Darwin said, he expressed it by saying as human beings we're here to cooperate and experience harmony with one another. Maslow talked about this hierarchy of needs, that every human being desires this self-actualization and transcendence. You are here to be divine and human. This is the great opportunity of life. This is what life means, is working this out exploring and discovering what it means for you to be divine and human. This is the significance of Jesus. What about any of that I just said is bad or sounds bad? You can exclude God and just think about the human mind and body and our instinctual functioning in the world. You can bring back in the idea of God, even the story of the Christian religion. What about any of that says that human beings are fundamentally and inherently bad? Nothing. It says nothing of that. You are not bad. No matter how you slice it, you are good. You are not an obstacle to overcome. You are not a condition to be cured. You are not a problem to be solved. You are not an inadequacy to apologize for. Religion has rubbed our noses in the false claim of our original badness, which has prevented us from laying claim to our original goodness. So where this truth must take us practically is to repair your relationship with yourself. You don't have a problem with God. You're not separated from God. You're separated from you. The problem is that you don't know God. The problem is that you don't know you. So you don't need to repair your relationship with God. You need to work on your relationship with yourself. What you are at the core is good. It's what you've been conditioned into. It's what you've learned. It's what's been programmed into your head that has created the problem. It's not what you fundamentally are. It's what's been indoctrinated into your life. So the solution to this, a way out of this religious pathology, is to connect with your fundamental goodness, that divine nature and essence that is in you and is you. It's a shift of source, if you will, shifting to that nature, that essence. We experience it through our deepest, innermost feelings. People speak of it as an inner knowing. It shows up as an intuition, as a tacit understanding, something that we feel in our gut. It's something that we know is true. We don't know why it's true. We can't explain it's true other than we fundamentally know that it is, because it's coming from that fundamental goodness, that divine nature and essence within us. This is why the lie, I am bad, is always going to lead to the second lie, falsehood, which is that I can't trust myself, right? If what you are is fundamentally bad and corrupt, well, you certainly can't trust what's inside of you. And we often hear religion misinterpret that verse that says the heart is wicked and can't be trusted. That's what the word heart in Hebrew is speaking of the mind, not the heart. It's speaking of that nucleus that we often find ourselves in a tandem ride with, what's driving our lives forward. And that scripture is talking about the mind, the things that have been indoctrinated into our heads. That stuff is what gets us into problems. Look, you can rationalize anything with the mind. You can rationalize hate, violence, racism, anything. You can rationalize up here in the head, in the mind. But what is down here? What is the fundamental and core part of who we are is good. That's the good part, that we can trust, that we can listen to, and that we can follow. That's what we have to repair our relationship with. How do we do that? Well, you have to access, listen trust, follow, speak, and act from that goodness within you, that goodness that bubbles up through your deepest feelings, from that divine nature and essence within you, that life, that spirit, that higher awareness, that consciousness, that kingdom of God, which Jesus referred to it as that, within you. I mean, you've got to lay down, take baby steps, and start that process of trusting, listening, following, and expressing what is part of that fundamental reality of who you are. It's baby steps. This doesn't happen overnight. And this is the focus of the Module 2 activity, for you to begin to repattern your life by shifting sources to that goodness within you, and to start taking baby steps in listening, trusting, following, and expressing that. So take a good look at that activity for Module 2. It's the personal work to do for this module. It's the way to uproot religious pathology. It's not going to happen overnight. That activity, that assignment is just really getting your feet wet in undoing religious pathology. Is something that you're going to want to be doing in the weeks, months, and even years ahead. So that is what I wanted to express in terms of this Module 2. And continue to do your personal work. Before you move on to Module 3, take the time to really invest yourself in the assignment and the activity for this module, and then I will see you in Module 3.